I waited months before I would tell my parents. My father was a non-practicing Catholic, and my mother was a practicing Catholic, but I still had that hesitation because I think instinctually I knew what their response would be, and that's why I hesitated and vacillated. And I would summarize their whole reaction into one phrase: "Over my dead body." And looking back now, these, 30, 40 years later, I understand what their concerns were. So their whole response to me was, "You can do anything you want. Why do you want to settle for this?" And as a young 18-year-old, I was able to articulate then, as I can clearly articulate now, this is what God is asking of me, and I believe this is what's going to fulfill my life. And that's why I pursued the path. My initial desire in going to seminary was, as every person should, to discern, to see. Because while I was invited by God, I wasn't necessarily sure that this was God's plan for me. That's what the discernment was. I think sometimes young men can be afraid in vocalizing and discerning because they think once they do, that's it. It's a fait accompli. Your contract is signed, sealed, and delivered. It's a discernment process. And in that discernment, we will find out one of two things. This is the path that God is calling us to, or God is using this time of formation to equip you for something else, for another path, the vocation of marriage, or indeed the vocation of single life. But not to do it because of hesitancy in relationship to how other people might think or respond would ultimately leave you losing more than you're gaining. Well, as I look back then, I was an 18-year-old kid. What did I really know? But it did give me a sense of clarity, because if the most influential people in my life were expressing reservations, concerns, then either they were right and I had to be attentive to them, or I became more firmly committed to what it is that God was asking of me, knowing that I would have to risk and indeed make sacrifices. And was I really ready to make those? So I think it was a moment of clarity to be able to say, this is what happens when you choose the path that God is setting before you. And whether or not you're committed to that path is something that becomes influenced by those around you. But I think it's in the pursuit of that you begin to understand this is truly what I'm called to. And I know it's what I'm called to because there's nothing easy about this. It's not like there was fanfare and applause. And initially it was a very isolating place. But then in that isolation, I was able to have deeper clarity from God and to be able to say, I'm with you every step of the journey. I'm with you. And that has never left me. Every step of the journey, God is with me and has accompanied me through some of the greatest moments and the deepest challenges of my priesthood. Christ himself says to us, peace I give you, not as the world gives it to you, but what is that peace? For me, that peace is knowing the depth of my relationship with Christ. And even after 29 years of priesthood, that the depth, so to speak, has only been scratched. So much more depth to that, and there's so much more that Christ is drawing me into below the surface of it. And to have that peace, that's paramount, so I live in the peace of Christ every day because I know who I am in relationship to Christ, who is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, in a world that's constantly changing, constantly contradicting itself, constantly sending out mixed messages. I have one who offers me crystal clarity. And that's sufficient. God is enough.